All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It's Sunday, so it's time to talk some speed runs, as always. So, welcome, Jaxler, to the show. Hello.
Hello, thanks for having me. Hi.
Hello. Thanks for being on. Well, hot off of PAX West, so perfect
Yeah,
timing. Well, let's dive into the speedrun topic. Today's topic is you, so
oh, okay.
just so we're clear. Um,
Yeah, let me be clear. Just goes invisible.
oh, true. All right. Well, let's start with the if you could like summarize kind of what you do in the scene.
Yeah, absolutely. So like Ace said, I'm Jaxler. I've been in the speedrunning community since I want to say 2014, 2015-ish. And kind of the TLDR is I focus on weird and obscure games that nobody's ever heard of before. Specifically, I like a lot of console stuff from like late 90s, early aughts, and just sort of stuff that's off the beaten path that doesn't really get talked about. So, a lot of stuff that I've run includes like stuff from the console SpongeBob series of games. Like, I have a lot of history with SpongeBob movie, Truth or Square, a little bit of Battle for Bikini Bottom in there. Chibi Robo. This list is gonna get long really quick, so Ace just cut me off.
No, I
But
mean, floor is yours.
yeah,
So
yeah.
keep
I
us here as
think
long as you
probably
want.
yeah, and I think probably the ones people probably know me for the most are some combo of Neopets: The Darkest Fury on PS2, Whiplash, and then Pumpkin Jack as well. Which, speaking of PAX West, we just did a PAX West, so that was pretty cool. But yeah, anything weird or unusual, either I know about it or know somebody who does. So that's kind of where I sort of slot into the big picture of the community, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and unusual games are sometimes the funniest speedruns, so
Oh yeah,
it works out pretty well.
yeah,
I'm sure you know a thing or two, so
yeah. I might
yeah.
potentially.
And we'll definitely get into that, but I didn't realize you were in the community for so long, so I guess we can
Yeah,
start from the very beginning.
yeah. So I feel like a lot of people got into speedrunning through like the I saw a GDQ video or something like that and goes from there. I did eventually fall into that, but I actually kind of started with like seeing like glitch compilations or like videos like talking about glitches in like more popular games. So I don't know if people have heard of the channels like Psycho or A and Start, for example, but just these kind of content creators who cover just like a whole smorgasbord of like glitches and stuff. And I was always really fascinated by like glitches in games and these kinds of things. So eventually, there was one we saw for like Majora's Mask or something like that, where we just saw all of this nonsense, and then we eventually got funneled into ZeldaSpeedruns.com, and we're like, okay, never believe what you read on the internet. Like, there's no way all of these things can be true. Like, some of this has to be made up. So a buddy of mine and I hopped on like the Wii U Virtual Console port of Majora's Mask and like messed around with like some of these, and we didn't know about like version exclusive glitches back then, but like we were able to get like half of them to work, and I think we even got day four, like the day four glitch to work off of. We were like convinced it was not going to work, and then like last try we got it off of. I think it was there's like the telescope in the pirate's fortress. I think that's how we ended up doing it, and that kind of like planted the seed where it was like, oh, I feel like I'm doing magic tricks. This feels like this really cool thing. And then like I get kind of pulled more and more into the speedrun ecosystem, and then I think I eventually pick up Ocarina of Time 3D as sort of my first real like speedrun. And I didn't have a way of recording it at the time because it's a 3DS, right? So I did like one or two runs, realized I was way in over my head, and then that's kind of when I started browsing the Speed Demo Archives forums for stuff like Chibi Robo and the SpongeBob movie game, and those were kind of the first two games I really sort of got my start in. Um, yeah, so that's kind of
Humble
kind of a
beginnings.
weird pipeline to get into it, but yeah,
It makes sense. I mean, speedrunning is heavily focused on glitches, so I've definitely seen glitch content before speedrunning, so I can see
yeah,
how it carries over pretty well. Especially since you mentioned A plus start. I know he's literally done speedrun speedruns on that channel, so it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it makes
Well,
sense.
and that's how I got exposed to it too, right? Because I know he's done videos on Sonic games before, and a lot of times he would, collaborate with the speedrunning community at the time, in order to better describe and understand the resources and stuff. That's how I first heard of the name Darkspine Sonic, who's like,
Mm,
if you don't remember that name, that's like one of the legends of 3D Sonic speedrunning, for
mhm,
example. Um,
yeah. So all works out. So did you say the 3DS version? And yeah, you can't capture that back then.
yeah, no. I
Yeah.
did eventually get a 3DS capture card and go back and like do one run just to have a recorded run. But I will say this to anyone who happens to be listening: don't make a 3D Zelda your first speed run. Those games are
Got it.
so hard. They're so hard.
Thank God I started with Mario. That
Yeah,
makes things easy. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Did they even have like capture software back then? Do you know?
Well, Loopy had like 3DS capture cards back then, but
Okay.
he was still kind of, and still like is in and out of like that era of like, is he actually going to be selling them or not? So it was like super difficult and inconsistent to try and get one, and if you couldn't get one, you'd have to find one secondhand, and they were really expensive. So, um, yeah, combination of that and Ocarina of Time 3D being a really really hard run didn't exactly help. So, and that was kind of the interesting thing too. Is like, especially at the time, like Chibi Robo like didn't really have a lot of runners or runs period, and then the SpongeBob movie game had a much smaller scene at the time. It had a lot more documentation, but it was a lot smaller at the time. And in some ways, that made it easier to get into speedrunning because there was less of a documentation on, oh, this is how like far away you are from like where you're starting to where you're trying to go, as opposed to, oh, I'm just starting here and who knows, right? Because it's not documented, right?
hmm So did those two games did have pages on Speed Demos Archive?
Definitely Chibi Robo. So Chibi Robo had like a lot of glitch talk and conversation stuff in a couple of different threads there. SpongeBob movie did a bit too, but the latter had kind of the benefit of people recording runs and putting them on YouTube or even streaming them. You had people in the early days like Cole and What Soup, and then eventually some more players like Chris and others who would put stuff up. But Chibi Robo didn't really have that. We eventually did have a Skype group, which was like the one and only like speedrun Discord, or not, sorry, like pre-Discord Skype group era thing that I was a part of.
Hmm.
Which is really funny looking back. Where we would kind of just like talk shop and like talk about runs and stuff like that. And once we kind of got it into that era, people were like doing runs and like actually recording them or like posting footage and stuff like that. Um, and also specifically to Chibi Robo, it pretty much started out as a mostly glitchless game, which in retrospect is very funny, because you can clip through any wall in the game just off bat. But at the time, we didn't really know of like much of any kind of glitches or anything like that, so it kind of also eased that progression into it. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I know it could have been hard to get some games like featured on SDA. Like they had pretty
Yeah.
strict rules. Like it had to be flashy or whatever, however they
Yeah.
decided things. So I wasn't sure like how popular the game had to be for them to be like, yep, we can put this on the page.
Yeah. Well, the awesome thing about SDA is whether or not your run was flashy enough to get featured on the page is the forums were just like really, really like just like a really, really big hotbed of like ingenuity and like documentation for ideas and stuff like that. So it's like a lot of the like there was so much stuff that we were able to build off of just because like some random person would just be like, "Oh, I had like XYZ thing happened to me," and we're like, "Oh snap!" As opposed to one of the people, I feel like a lot of older older school speedrunners bemoan like the Discord era that speedrunning is in right now, where all the information and documentation stuff like that is in a Discord server somewhere. Which is tough because Discord is notoriously tough to search around in, as opposed to if it's on a forum, then you just Google it,
Mhm.
and SEO will take you to the post that you're looking for. So yeah, I don't know. I look fondly back on there. Sometimes I'll go back and like look at all the old SDA threads and just like because a lot of us were younger back then, so it kind of it's a reflection of what we were like when we were a little bit younger. But it's also just like, oh, they lack critical information. They don't know what's coming, and
They
it's just
don't
like a
know.
really kind of funny, dramatic irony, if you will.
Hmm. Yeah, I've never really. I came from an era where speedrun.com was already prevalent, so
Mm.
I have not like looked around the forums or anything. That's foreign territory to me. So.
Yeah, to kind of give you an idea of where I place, I feel like you kind of have like the old head SDA era, and then you have like the SRCOM era. I kind of slot in a little bit in the middle. I was very much in the tail end of like kind of that transition point where like SDA was kind of still being used but not, and then SRC was really starting to pop off and grow, if that
Hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. The timeline
Yeah.
lines up. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's funny too because it really wasn't until the advent of some of those like community building tools like streaming and Discord groups and stuff like that, SRC, where like I really started to be able to actually branch out because I really for the better part of a year I'd say I stuck to Chibi Robo and SpongeBob Movie, which isn't without fault because those are two games that kind of require you to put a boatload of time into, especially SpongeBob Movie. If you've seen runs of those at all in 2024, that game is ridiculously hard. Chibi Robo's up there too, but it's in a different kind of way. That's a spreadsheet game. You play Chibi Robo in a spreadsheet. I'm gonna be
Hmm.
so real. It's one of those kind of routing puzzle sort of things. But it really wasn't until those like tools started to develop that I actually kind of started branching out into other games, and there was other things that sort of drove that process too a little bit. I can get into if you want, but
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the first couple of games, the Chibi Robo and the SpongeBob movie. Like, how do those speed runs? I guess what makes them cool? How do they work, etc. Just whatever's notable.
yeah. I'll start with Chibi Robo because that's a way easier question for me to answer. Chibi Robo, I would say, is probably one of the most unique speedruns. Period. Because it's so for those who don't know what Chibi Robo is, it's a 3D action adventure game where you play a 4-inch tall robot climbing around a human-sized home, and you have things like this battery mechanic where like you do actions in the game and it takes away your energy. That also acts as like your health bar, and if you run out, you die. You got to recharge it at a wall outlet, things of that nature. You also have like a day-night cycle and money routes that you need to hit. So in addition to being like this 3D kind of sort of action adventure platformer, you also have a ton of routing nonsense and like tiny little micro things that you have to keep in the back of your head over the course of the entire run. And you also need to like potentially route on the fly too if you get lucky or unlucky with things like money drops. And because of that, you don't like usually you get one or the other. You get like a very like something like a Pokemon where it's like very very route heavy, very very notes and flow charts and being able to come up with solutions to new situations, right? And then you have stuff like, I guess like a 3D Mario where it's like, okay, I'm doing platforming and everything's kind of deterministic, right? I know exactly what I need to do here. It might still be hard, but I know exactly what to expect and what to do and how to move through this environment. And Chibi Robo sandwiches both of them together really really elegantly, and there's honestly no run that's even remotely like it, and I just think that's really dope. um it's kind of hard to explain without like seeing it in motion, but like there's so many moments where you like do all the things you need to do on a certain day like just as the timer runs out, or like you get to an outlet with like half a like decimal point of energy left, and it's just like really cool little moments like that. And plus you can clip through any wall in the game, and that's just cool. I don't know. I like clipping through walls. I think Out of Bounds is like one of the sickest things in video games, and you can just do it anywhere. It's great. So there's my Chibi Robo pitch. The run itself is pretty long. Unfortunately, I think someone did the math, and it's like over half the run is cutscene.
Hmm.
Which is why someone's I think Kobe's work one of another runner is working on like a cutscene skip mod sort of thing, right? Um, but it also has a really good like bingo and especially lockout bingo format. We did lockout bingo actually at SGDQ not too long ago, and that was a whole heckin' lot of fun. But we'll just play bingo all the time because it kind of lets you work both aspects of the routing on the fly and the game knowledge versus the execution and platforming and that nonsense. So Chibi Robo is really special to me. It's my favorite game of all time. I got Chibi Robo on the shirt right here. That's how you know.
Hmm.
That's how you know how starved I am for Chibi Robo merchandise. Is that if he appears in like the corner of a shirt, I will buy it on frame one. Um,
A
but
true fan.
yeah, yeah, true fan. But yeah, that's kind of my pitch for Chibi Robo, if you will. It's really special, very important game to me. So, SpongeBob movie on the other hand is like it's so I feel like in terms of 3D platformer games, a lot of times you'll have, your classical movement based games. Like you'll have your Mario Odysseys or your Jack and Daxters. And then other platformer games, I'll call like I like to call them bag of tricks speedruns, where you just have like a bunch of random like scattered glitch tech and nonsense that comes into play at some point and lets you do some BS. And SpongeBob movie is like a great example of that kind of bag of tricks run. Where it's a 3D collectathon platformer, so think like your Mario 64. If you know Battle for Bikini Bottom, made in the same engine, same devs. But there's a lot of like unique and bizarre situational tech, and that's like all over the place in the run. So you've got like weird damage boost stuff. You've got like a lot of really precise 1 to 2 frame tricks. That's why I complain about how hard the game is in 2024 is because like there's just so many 1 to 2 frame tricks. It's just rough. It's really rough.
You
But
think
there's
you
also
have it
just like
bad?
yeah. I forgot that I'm talking to the Mario one runner. My
Yeah,
bad.
it's
But
fine.
it's fine. But at the same time, there's just like a bunch of really like I always like the really cool flashy glitches, kind of like we were talking about at the start of this, right? So one of my favorites, for example, is something called guitar gliding, where you have these wall jump platforms, right? And on a certain timing, if you press like your air guitar button, you just start floating midair. And if you spin, you can just start gliding around midair while ever so slightly losing height. And at like the very end of the run, you can combine that with something called a lag clip to clip through the walls and go out of bounds in this glide state and just glide to the end of that part of the level.
Hmm.
It's so dope, and you use it like once, and it's just like stuff like that. It's just like ton of variety. There's like a memory corruption glitch at like the end of the no pause storage run, which is that's kind of our any percent for lack of a better term. Like you do like memory corruption, memory manipulation type of nonsense. It's just and then you also have like the more standard like platforming stuff like your damage boosting and a tech we have called bash boosting, which is just the tech is also just really satisfying to perform too. It's one of those like good feedback sort of speedruns. So that's what a lot of what I get out of it. It's also just again, it's impossible. It's so there's just so much different things you have to be good at. In some other games that I've run more recently where it's a lot more movement focused, you can kind of like improvise with your movement, right? So like for example, like if you bonk in Mario Odyssey, right? And like you're no longer doing the movement lineup that you normally do. You can improvise by doing some other movement sequence to get back to where you need to go, right? Movie, you don't have such a luxury because everything is so specific and particular. So if you mess something up, you just have to eat it, and it can be really punishing to run the game as a result. You could argue Battle for Bikini Bottom's kind of the same way too, because its major movement tech gets canceled the moment you take damage. So it's like, yeah. Um,
Yeah.
which and especially at the time, it was interesting too because at the time both of the runs were pretty long. So I want to say Chibi Robo at the time was 2 hour 40-minute run, and then SpongeBob Movie Game was it like the record was an hour and a half, but it was getting pushed down and down. Sorry, let me tell my phone to stop yelling at me real quick. Uh, I'll explain what that was later, probably. Uh, but yeah, it wasn't. It was. It's also kind of interesting that I started out with the longer runs and didn't really care because I feel like a lot of people when they're looking for speed runs, like they have a concept of like there's a bit more visibility to speedrunning. They know how short some game speedruns can be. And so, like, as a result, they're like, oh, I wouldn't want to run something like Chibi Robo because it takes like 2 hours, right? But I didn't know any better.
Hmm.
So I just thought that's what speedrunning was, right? Well, I guess that's not true because I ran OT, but like, or 3D, but like, I didn't know any better, right? So, like, I don't know. It's kind of interesting, but that's probably just a non sequitur.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I definitely see most people start off, and I would even recommend starting off with something that's nice, quick, easy to learn, doesn't take too
Yeah.
long, so you can just kind of get a feel for it. Because yeah, I don't run anything that's all too long, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I've done 120 star once, but
I'm sorry.
eh, I don't know,
I,
it's
I am
fun.
I am a known Mario 64 hater, so I am sorry.
Oh, okay. Eh,
No,
I,
you're good.
I like the movement. I
No, I
definitely.
respect. I respect. I like watching it. I
Oh yeah.
just can't stand that game's camera. I just
Yeah,
can't.
yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, that camera.
It's so bad. It's just not good. It's all
Yeah.
cope. It's all cope. I'm sorry.
I mean, what's great is it's good for like being able to hit your angles with the notches because it kind of works in
Yeah.
sync with that sometimes. But yeah, for a casual thing, oof. But I mean, they had nothing to base it off of. It was like one of the first to ever
Yeah.
do it, so I'm gonna
I
give it
can't
some
give them
slack.
crap for that.
Yeah,
Exactly, right?
they
But I'm like,
tried. I'll give them that.
yeah.
Like, it's still one of the like most influential and impactful games ever made. So
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I'll give it that. But yeah, I've definitely been pissed off by the camera more than a dozen times. So I can understand. Whoa, camera. Speaking of cameras, mine was freaking out. Anyway,
Yeah, you're good.
um, so yeah, definitely some long games to start off with, properly because that's when
Yeah.
actual streaming, I assume, came into the picture.
Yeah. I kind of started like with streaming Chibi Robo and a bit of SpongeBob movie too.
And so this was still before SRC.
I think this was right at the advent of SRC, at least
Got
from
it.
what I remember.
So when you first submitted runs, it would have been like speedrun.com.
Yeah,
Okay.
probably.
Yeah, because SDA, like, they would only like show the record or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to
And Lord,
remember.
was I not good enough to be able to have record back then.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly pretty impressive how optimized a lot of the runs were back then, even for
Yeah.
more obscure games like those. So
Yeah,
always cool to see.
the thing you'll always find with obscure games like this is the people who run them really, really care about them. And so even if there's no like extrinsic motivator as like, oh, I got bopped by this person, or oh, because like sometimes with like bigger games, if you're streaming on Twitch, you'll get like a bigger audience, right? Like that can be an extrinsic motivator too, right? But if you're running a game that people, I'm not saying people don't care about it, but it's like broadly people don't really check
It's
out, or
obscure.
it's
It's got a
obscure, right?
cult following, but that's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like if you're running something like that obscure, then like the people who do it because they love doing it, right? More than any. And I'm not saying people who run like bigger games don't do it because they love doing it. That's like far from the truth. But like, there's a specific breed of that kind of person that comes out in some of these more
Hmm.
obscure runs, if that makes sense. And I think being exposed to that as like my first speedrunning experience really kind of put me in the direction of the speedrunner I kind of wanted to be, right? Because I am just someone who cares a lot about things generally, And so like I wanted to get other people to care too, if that makes sense. And it's like, people already care about like, Ocarina of Time, right? Because that's a beloved
It's
game,
Ocarina of Time. Yeah.
right? But it's a bit harder of a sell to get people to care about, Chibi Robo if they've never heard of it, right? So in a weird way, I think kind of being around those runners kind of influenced my direction of, oh, I'm going to stick to being off the beaten path and play what I really, really love, which is all this, I think part of it too is I didn't always grow up with all the popular stuff, right? I think my parents were not gamers, so I think a lot of times in like birthdays or for Christmas, in terms of like getting us like a game or something like that, they knew Pokemon was a safe bet, and they knew all these cartoons that we watched were also probably safe bets. So I grew up with like Scooby Doo games, like freaking Stuart Little 2,
Oh
SpongeBob
gosh.
games, just like the whole gamut of just like licensed stuff. And like in that like early era, like the late 90s, early 2000s, it was kind of a golden age for licensed games. I mean, you had Scooby Night of 100 Frights, you had Simpsons Hit and Run, which I was not allowed to play, but Simpsons Hit and Run is from that era, right? You have Battle for Bikini Bottom, SpongeBob movie, um just the list goes on, right? um I mean, you could throw GoldenEye into that too, technically, right? And
Yeah.
so like I feel like if you got into gaming at a different generation, that you might not you would be more likely to expect like these bigger names to be the ones making the good games as opposed to like your single A or double A devs or like your third party devs or even like indie teams, right? So I don't know. I slot into speedrunning at such a weird time and like such a weird era with the games I grew up with. I think that's part of the reason why I'm just like this, for lack of a better.
Okay.
Why is he like this?
Yeah, it is kind of interesting how like licensed games became like more and more shovelware over time, but back
Yeah.
when it started, like there were some bangers there.
Oh yeah.
They
And I
did.
think part of it too is like, earlier on, it was like you had less opportunities for things like contracts and IP and stuff like that. So like when you got that opportunity, like for in the SpongeBob games example, like I know a lot of the devs at the time were also really big fans of the show, so they
Mhm.
wanted to make a game that reflected the show source material accurately and faithfully, right? And I
They
think
don't
you
do
had a
that
lot of
anymore.
that during that era too. And they don't really do that anymore,
Yeah.
outside of like specific cases, but it's like
Yeah.
there's like a Totally Spies game that got announced, and I'm like, I've seen no gameplay footage of it. I don't think it's any of trailers have been announced. I desperately want to see what they turn that game into because it's either going to be a banger or like the worst thing imaginable.
Which in
I don't know
itself
if
is a banger.
yeah, exactly, right.
Win-win
Because
either
like
way.
Totally Spies is a show I watched growing up, but I don't remember any games coming out about. I might be wrong. I'd have to do some digging. Um, but like I don't know.
Yeah. All right. So I guess moving ahead in the timeline a little bit.
Mhm.
Uh where does that lead?
Yeah. So for context, in 2015, I would have been like take the year I too. So I would have been like 17. So I'm getting into speedrunning at the end of high school. And something that I'm also getting into now that well not really getting into, but something that happened to me around about the same time as I'm graduating high school is type 1 diabetes.
Hmm.
So I'm a type 1 diabetic. I've got my insulin pump on right here. And I didn't, so you're born with type 1 diabetes, right? But it doesn't necessarily manifest, at birth or right away. Sometimes it can like lay underneath the surface for a bit. And I was also like a competitive swimmer since like age 10, so that probably contributed to it since I swam distance. But that's neither here nor there. So basically, around about this time where I'm really starting to like try to make strides in these longer speed runs, I start having to learn how to manage this really brutal chronic illness that makes it really difficult to like commit to doing things for that long. And it got to a point where I really couldn't run Chibi Robo or SpongeBob Movie anymore because like the diabetes was just getting in the way between like treating it versus just the physical symptoms of the illness were making it really difficult. So what I ended up doing actually, I picked up another game actually right after that, which was another SpongeBob game by the name of SpongeBob's Truth or Square, and I would go on to pour an ungodly amount of hours into that game. And I knew about this game, one because it was made after SpongeBob Movie by the same devs, different engine, but same devs. But I also knew that it was short, and it wasn't really a game that was talked about all that much in the SpongeBob community at large back then. But what I did know is that it was like a 30-minute, like a 30-minute something run, or 30 to 40 minutes something run, because there was this hilarious glitch that let you just trick the game into beating all the levels by playing the same level over and over. And I thought that was hilarious. And I'm like, okay, well, if I can't do these two longer games right now, I'll play this shorter game and just kind of do it for fun as a way to not only, keep myself speedrunning, but learn how to speedrun with this chronic illness, right? And then however many years later, I haven't played Truth or Square in forever now. Um, but like it, it spiraled out of control, for lack of a better term. And so I kind of pivoted into Truth or Square for a honestly the better part of like 3 or 4 years. Now I would start to pick up other games along the way as well, but in a weird way, I kind of credit Truth or Square for kind of saving me a little bit, because I might have given up on speedrunning if I hadn't seen that as like an outlet, if that makes sense, right? Because I'm someone who's really motivated by self improvement and like really progressing towards things, and speedrunning fulfilled that for me for sure. But I was also doing competitive swimming at the time, and at least if I had one source of that, I figured I would be fine. But later on into college, it got to the point where I'm like, I can't justify training in swimming at the level I used to anymore because of this illness, and also because no one wanted to help me figure out my disease. But that's neither here nor there. Um, but it's like like Truth or Square kind of comes into the picture, and it kind of gives me that shorter game that I really needed to be able to like actually speedrun and like really work towards that self improvement bit, right? So, but yeah, so I'd say kind of Truth or Square was like there was kind of like I started with Chibi Robo SpongeBob Movie, then the Truth or Square bug hits me for a good couple of years, and then once I like pick up Truth or Square, I kind of realized that I really enjoy the learning process, if that makes sense. I think one of the most important things about speedrunning is it's truly an exercise of learning how to learn, in the sense of like you have to learn how to be a good student and learn how to process and internalize information in order to succeed. If you're someone like me who wants to learn a bunch of different games, right? And so like as a result of that, I kind of fell in love with learning more games and like the process of getting good at new things, right? And that kind of opened my eyes a bit, because in the world of swimming, for example, there are only so many events that you can compete in. You have your four strokes, you have like the 100 and 200 for all of those, you got two IMs, like three distance freestyle events, and then relays, and like the 50 free, but we don't talk about the 50 free. um but there's a ceiling to like what you can potentially compete in and swim, right? But in speedrunning, because there are like an infinite amount of games, there's an infinite amount of things to compete in speedrunning, an infinite amount of new ways to push yourself and grow as a person. And that's kind of when I started to, in addition to other health stuff at the time, where I started to pivot out of swimming and into speedrunning, right? So I ended up really pushing myself in Truth or Square. And then I started doing like things like 12-hour challenges. So I learned like Scooby Night of 100 Frights. I think I did like Dog's Life at some point and did a couple runs and then was like, I'm good. Uh, and then it just kind of like spirals out of control from there, honestly. That's, probably around the time I picked up Neopets as well. So yeah, you kind of have my high school era of like Chibi Robo and SpongeBob movie, and then as I make my way into college, kind of, I'm still working on those games once I like my health gets better, but really picking up the shorter games like Truth or Square, Scooby Night of 100 Frights, Neopets the Darkest Fairy, and then it gets fuzzy from there on out. But I just keep I love learning speedruns. That's the TLDR on this part of the timeline.
Fair enough. And yeah, that is a very important part of the process because yeah, we're kind of like lucky to be in the era right now where like all the information is there, so you don't have to like
Yeah,
worry too much, especially if you play a popular game. It's just all documented.
yeah,
Have fun. It's a lot easier when you're starting out in modern era, but yeah, like back then,
yeah.
like there
And,
wasn't as much information, so you had to
yeah.
learn.
Well, and in some ways, that kind of gave you the opportunity to be the person who found things, right?
Hmm.
Like that was one of the greatest things about running Truth or Square, is there was a lot of things that were known about the any percent route, right? But there were tons of other things that were unexplored, and so that was really my first experience where I got to really be a glitch hunter and a strat finder and a router, right? Where I just got to find a whole bunch of different stuff. I went from seeing all these magic tricks in these YouTube compilations to actually being able to invent some. And that's a really special thing. And you don't really get that if you run a super popular game, right? Because everyone else has already played and run the game to death, right? So how likely is it that you're going to find something that no one else has ever seen before? Um,
Sometimes you despawn a couple things by accident.
yeah, but it's not really up to you, right? Where
No, no.
like that's when that's why oftentimes you'll see people run new games on release, is because even if they have no plan on running it, they just want to see if they can find something cool, and be a part of this bit of history, right?
Yeah, you can only
Because
discover something once for the first
yeah,
time,
exactly.
so
Yeah, you can only find something once, right? Um, yeah, so the Truth or Square holds like a really special place in my heart for that reason, because I mean I just got a lot out of that game because truly and honestly I was really the only person running it for a good while, so there was kind of that aspect of competing against myself as well as just like steady improvement, finding new things that enabled new improvement, and it's just kind of this glorious cycle that kind of, you know, because now I'm at the point as a speedrunner where because I've learned how to learn and like have gotten better at learning speedruns, like I tend to burn through games that I pick up a little bit quicker, just because I sort of iterate on my practice and my gameplay a bit faster, and that just comes with time as a speedrunner, right? But like, Truth or Square was kind of this era where it was like I didn't really have those skills yet. So it was kind of where I learned to sort of hone those skills, if that makes sense. Um, and that's not even to like mention the game itself, which is just so here's the deal with Truth or Square. I casually the game I would say is aggressively okay. It is aggressively mediocre. It's just pretty straightforward platforming into sections where you got to beat up enemies. It can be a little repetitive, but it's not a bad game, right? It's just kind of it's fine, right? As a speedrun, it is way more interesting to speedrun Truth or Square than it is to play Truth or Square, because you have all sorts of nonsense movement tech. You have things like the ability to hammer clip through walls. You have something called spin hopping, which is where you get a power up and then you short hop and then use an air spin, and you just chain those in order to like just sort of cruise through. It makes the boring platform less boring because now you have to pay attention to where you space your resources. So we've elevated the platforming. We skip a lot of the fights, and then there's other stuff too. Like there's the level skip glitch where if you either recollect an end level collectible or hit a certain trigger out of bounds over and over, it ticks up the levels completed counter in the game's memory and lets you just shortcut right to the final boss if you want. You can also do things like spin boosts, where you can clank off a spinner enemy and just go flying into the air and then chain a jump off of it. That'll let you go out of bounds. There's just so much funny things you can do in that game. And it's like the thing that's great about it is it's not crazy hard, right? Like the thing that I always used to say is like Truth or Square is like one of the greatest beginner speedruns, where it's a really, really low skill floor, meaning it's really easy to get into while not feeling like you're just, oh, I'm just playing through the game casually but fast. The tech is straightforward and it kind of allows you to feel like you're actually breaking the game right away, which I think is really important if you're trying to hook someone new into speedrunning. Is like to give them that feeling that, oh yeah, I'm that guy. You know, I look at this thing I just did. I just went out of bounds. I just skipped that level. I feel awesome, right? But then it also has, you know, more meat on the bone in terms of skill expression, like I was talking about with, you know, placing jumps and spins for optimal movement. Some of the skips we went on to find were really, really tough. There's also no coyote time in this game, so it can be a bit tricky to master some of the platforming. Through no fault of the game's own, you know, but I don't know. If you're listening to this and you're looking for something new or weird, or you're looking for your first run, consider Truth or Square. It's on 360 and Wii as well, which means it's really easy to get a copy of. Or just, you know, just I don't know if I'm allowed to I don't know what our stance is on Dolphin here. And if I'll get in trouble. But that's an option too. I'll just say that. So
It's true.
I I feel like I'm just starting to pitch all of my speed games now, but honestly, I don't mind because again, I just love speedrunning. So
Yeah.
I guess this is what you signed up for, Ace. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. You got the platform, why not use it, right?
Mm,
But yeah, I mean, I'm not too familiar with these games because I did not grow up with them. So it's interesting to learn just how like
yeah,
technically involved they are for being what they are. You don't
yeah,
expect that, I guess. It's the best way
yeah.
to
I don't
put
know.
it.
The best part too is I could go on and on and on about these different games, and if you want me to, I feel free. But like at the same time, it's like every one of these different games that I've been able to like work on and find like has something special or unique to it, or something really ridiculous, right? And that's why I always encourage people to, like, if they're looking at speedrunning or they're looking at something new in speedrunning, like take something off the beaten path because it'll really surprise you. Um, I also, this is like a side thing too. I also think that it's really healthy to learn not even just multiple games, but like multiple types of games. And I feel like it makes you better at whatever speed game like you're real like whatever you consider like your main speed game, right? Like Truth or Square was a great example for me where I would just like grind and grind and grind and grind and try to get my times down in that game, and then I would get a bit, you know, tired, or I'd take a break or something like that and work on a different game with a different movement system, right? And then I'd come back to Truth or Square, and like next day I would have record, you know, that sort of thing, right? I think when you pick up other games and like work on that process of learning how to learn, it kind of reroutes your brain in a way that allows you to better understand whatever game that you main, if that makes sense, right? Like, I don't know if that experience speaks true to you, Ace, but like, you know, I could imagine like playing something like Mario 64 would, like, because it's something so completely different, would kind of just like open your brain up a little bit. I don't know if that rings true. Maybe it's different for like 2D platformer games, but like,
I feel like 2D platformers are too simple to like you
mm,
have to think too much about it, but
yeah,
you kind of just, at least with what I play, it's like here are the inputs. Now do keep
do
going
them.
until you hit them
Yeah,
correctly. Good job. Good job, champ. You did
yeah.
it. You don't have to like do any of the
I
other.
guess that would apply more to something like with a bit more of a, not like fluid movement system, but a bit more like moving parts to it. Like, I don't know, something like a
Yeah.
Celeste, where it's like there is that wiggle room. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just blowing smoke. You know, who knows?
I mean,
Tell
speaking
us in
from
the YouTube comments. Am I being stupid? Let me know.
well, I don't know if we can trust YouTube comments, but
But
yeah. All right.
yeah,
I guess we can continue moving on
yeah,
as we
sure
do.
thing. Yeah, so like in college, like I ended up learning like a lot more stuff. Like I mentioned, Night of 100 Frights, which is Scooby Doo nonsense, obviously. But Neopets, Dog's Life, like there's just like a whole. I've run like how many games do I
All
even
the
have in here?
bangers.
It's like all the bangers. Like I have like like over 20 something games in just my SRC. There's a couple that aren't listed here, but I think when like moving on from that, like I didn't really get into like the full speedrunning like community aspect of it and really internalize it until I went to college. So I went to college in upstate New York, Rochester, and we had a local speedrunning group there called Speedruns Rochester that met out of my school actually. And
Hmm.
so we'd like meet up every week and we would just bring a game that we were working on and just chill and do runs and talk shop and what have you. And I think that's what really kind of pulled me deeper in like it feels like all these little like micro events that kind of sucked me in deeper and deeper to the whole speedrunning rabbit hole. But I think it's like I think that kind of plays into something people talk about with like in-person events like GDQ is it's like once you like meet speedrunning people, it's really hard to go back like and like not want to spend time with them, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. I've always
Oh
kind
yeah.
of believed that like speed like not no one's perfect, and I'm not trying to make like a blanket statement, but I feel like speedrunning compared to other gaming communities just attracts like not like better quality
Genuine
people, but kind
humans.
genuine humans. Exactly, right? Where it's just like
We get
because
it.
in my case, for example, like not that no one cares, but also like in the grand scheme of things, does it really matter that I have at the time I have world record in like Neopets or for the PS2 or like SpongeBob, right? Like at the end of the day, it's really difficult to have an ego about those sorts of things because like you're kind of at that point you'd have kind of an ego over a molehill, right?
Hmm.
As opposed to like something like fighting games where kind of the amount that people want to talk to you and kind of care about you is directly proportional to what you do. It's not about who you are, but it's about what you are, right? And again, that's a blatant statement, right? But like it's true. Like the better a player you are, the more likely people want to come up and talk to you and like be your friend and stuff like that or play friendlies with you. The more involved you are with like TOing or volunteering, the more likely people are going to want to talk to you and spend time with you and trust you, right? And there's elements to that in speedrunning for sure. But so many of the people that I made friends with in speedrunning were either like, obviously through friends, but also just like if you show even a modicum of interest in what someone else in speedrunning cares about, you're friends now. Like it's just over. Like one of my best, yeah, literally, like
Okay.
one of my best friends in speedrunning, Helix, we literally met because there was a Project M friendly setup in the Smash room at SGDQ 2018. I met two people this way actually. So I met Helix and then I also met Shenanigans. The who, if you don't know who that is, one of the most not amazing human being, but also just like legendary Pokemon speedrunner. And there was just a Project M setup, and I was just if there's a setup, you can always just be like, hey, mind if I hop in? And they were like, sure. And then those two ended up being the two first friends I ever made at GDQ, right? And it's just you don't really get that anywhere else, right? You don't get like the practice room vibe in any other kind of community, at least any that I've been able to find. So when I have having something like Speedruns Rochester in my backyard, I think was really kind of formative too, and it was also like a place where like it kind of like made me feel like people cared about the weird stuff because like for all that I do it's like it's really tough when people aren't really seeing what you're doing, right? So it can kind of be demotivating, but when you have friends that are right there seeing what you're working on and celebrate your success, that's kind of what keeps you going, right? And it's, the little things that we did. Like we would do 12-hour challenges together where we'd all pick a game and like spend a club meeting just learning a new game. Like I learned like 3 different games that way, like Scooby and Neopets, and unfortunately for myself, Dog's Life for the PS2. Um, so it was kind of in that era, I would say my focus kind of shifted. Obviously I'm still really focused on speedrunning and the doing of the thing and the craft of it, right? But now my attention the why shifted fundamentally during that period, right? Where it was like, I was doing this thing because it was cool and I was having a lot of fun doing it. Now I was kind of doing it where I want to show these games to people and really show people not only what they're missing, but what's like, I want to show these really cool things to people that they might not have ever heard of before, right? I want to show them that speedrunning is more than just, Minecraft and Dark Souls and all the popular, not to disparage against those games, but like, speedrunning, the scope of speedrunning is a lot bigger than that. And I wanted to share the love that I had received with other people, if that makes sense. So
Hmm.
in a way, I kind of started picking up more speedruns in order to sort of branch out and reach to more people in some way. Now, a lot of that was still stuff I grew up with. So it's like, oh, I grew up with PS2 Neopets, the greatest Zelda game ever made, right? I grew up with Night of 100 Frights. It was made by Battle for Bikini Bottom devs, right? Um, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm running in circles a little bit. But yeah, some of those games that I picked up during that era ended up being like kind of games that ended up kind of, I don't know if I'd say putting me on the map because I don't ever feel like I'm on the map, if that makes sense. But like, for example, during that era, I started learning Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions DS, which would go on to be, well, and Scooby as well, which would both go on to be my first GDQ mainline appearances, right? Which was like a really big deal for me. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah. Was SGDQ 2018 the first event you went to?
yeah, that was the first in-person GDQ I have gone to, and I have not missed an in-person GDQ mainline GDQ since.
That was my first GDQ too.
Really?
Yep.
That's crazy.
Yep.
That's it's so interesting where it's just like ships passing in the night where it's just like, oh, we could have like ran into each other that early, but it
Yeah.
just. But like the other thing too is I had really bad social anxiety. I still kind of do have social anxiety to a pretty significant degree. So it
Relatable.
was one
Yeah.
of those. Yeah, and if you're your first GDQ, you feel like a fish out of water because it's like I
What
don't
am I
know
doing here?
anybody. What am I doing here? I don't know anybody. And I credit a lot of my Speedruns Rochester friends to helping me out in that regard because a lot of us went that event. But I was talking a bit about Helix and Shenanigans as well, right? Like Shenanigans was maybe the first one of the first people I met at that GDQ, and he kind of picked up on the fact that I kind of looked like I looked like deer in headlights and didn't really know what to do or where to go. So I was like, "Hey, we're gonna go get food. If you want to come with us, feel free." And I'm like, "Okay." And so like I didn't even eat anything because I have issues with certain food. It's a whole thing, texture issues. But it's like just like it was like of all people like Shenanigans, like this person who like is of esteem in the speedrunning community was just like, yeah, no, come hang with us, you're chill. And I'm like that's not heard of. Like you
Me?
don't like yeah, well no, not even like that. It's just like like think about like Smash for example. Like you would never like think like someone like HBox would be like, hey, yeah, come feel free to come grab lunch with us. You know, he's not a bad guy, but I don't think he'd do that. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Or like your insert your favorite mainstream content creator here. You know what I mean? Like
No, yeah, I get it.
you really don't get that anywhere else. And it's like I feel like especially at in-person GDQs, and I think this probably goes for other in-person events. Like there's kind of an unspoken culture of taking people under your wing and like introducing them to your friends and like just getting them to know people. And that's something I really appreciate about that as well, if that makes sense, because it is daunting if you don't know anybody.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to remember my first experience because, I was lucky to be in a community that was already pretty popular, so
Yeah,
I kind of already knew people, but I remember like those are the only people I knew, so if they were busy, I'd just like play games in the practice room by myself for hours. That's all
Yeah.
I did. It's like because I didn't know anyone. I didn't want to talk to anyone because
Yeah.
ye
'Cause you don't know any better, right? Like
reasons.
just like I didn't even play games. I would just wander the practice room and just like
Yeah.
see what people were doing. And there is an appeal to that for sure. But it's like it's like friends. It's really an exponential effect where it's like you make a couple friends your first GDQ, you double that next GDQ, and then GDQ after that, you pretty much know the whole venue. Um,
Hmm.
and that's just so awesome. But yeah, I don't know. Speedrunning's cool.
It is pretty cool. I
It's
gotta give it
pretty
that.
dang cool. I don't
Yeah.
know.
It didn't. It took till like post pandemic where I really when I went to GDQs again, I like actually was like, here we go.
Oh, I
Took me
get
a
this
while.
now. Yeah.
Yeah.
You kind of have
Now
to
I
have
can
like that
talk to
moment where
people.
it clicks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
It took a hell of a while for me, but yeah, that's that social anxiety.
Yeah.
Shout outs to medication.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's
Medication.
fucking go. Anyway. But yeah, I mean, even the pre-pandemic GDQs, I still remember very fondly, even if I didn't like
Mhm.
have the amount of fun I do now because I actually talk to everyone and don't feel weird about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Something about the vibes, good vibes all the
Yeah.
time at the GDQs.
I feel like every GDQ kind of gets better than the last. Um,
Yeah.
there was some specific stuff for me at some of the first couple of GDQs I went. That kind of made things like they were fun, but it made things kind of like weird, like drama type of things.
Mm,
You
yeah.
know.
I've been fairly good at avoiding that kind of stuff because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, drama is a little harder to come by here compared to most
Yeah.
things, especially. So that's
Yeah.
good.
It
But
it is. That's also why I try to steer people away from bigger communities. The
mm,
bigger the community is, the more likely just by the numbers game you are of having people that aren't nice, right?
yeah, yeah,
And so it's like, when you have a small game, like you have those one or two people who it's like, this is my thing, this is my entire personality. No,
yeah.
maybe not that severe, but it's like, they really want people to stick around because they don't, Chibi Robo was a great example of this because our joke in the community was, oh snap, it's our we got another runner before 2 years are up. It's like we get a new runner every other year. Now it's like, oh, we got another runner within the year. Let's freaking go, right? Where it's like, people in these smaller communities don't not to like scare off new runners, but also just like they want them to feel at home because they want them to stick around. Because I think for a lot of us, we just want people to keep playing these games once we're gone, right? Not even in like the cosmic sense, like when we're, pushing up daisies, right? But like in the sense of like, not, they're gonna have to rip the controller away from me when I'm like 90 something, right? But like, not everyone's the same way, right? Like some people are just going to reach a phase in their life where they're not speedrunning anymore. And I think for a lot of us, it's a matter of just making sure that there's documentation where even if there's no one that's playing it, the resources are there that somebody can. And I think
Hmm.
that's a big deal.
Yeah. I can think of a good example of that is when in the Punch Out community, like they kind of went dormant after the 2000s, and then when Sinister
Mhm.
came around, luckily there was so much documentation that I was able to like kind of grow it back, and now it's some big thing.
Yeah.
Like there's a little more to it than that, but that's like the simplified thing from what I've heard. And
Yeah.
yeah, so you need that like former documentation in order to even if things go silent, it can always be brought back, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's a big part of the reason why a lot of smaller communities focus so much on getting that one GDQ run for all that's worth, or like that one really big marathon showcase, is because that also serves as documentation too, right?
Hmm.
I mean, how many people, like, in the chat, raise your hand if you got into speedrunning because a GDQ video appeared up on your feed, It's like,
Did
it's like one
not
of
raise
those
my
things.
hand.
You did not raise your hand.
No,
Wow.
I
Okay.
know. I'm weird now. I
So,
accidentally found a summoning salt video. which is
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
that'll do it.
that'll also do it. Yeah, I had no
You-
idea what GDQ was. It's crazy. It would have
Interesting.
been something I probably would have been interested in, but just never showed up.
Yeah.
Unlucky. Bad RNG.
Yeah, yeah, bad RNG. But it's like, at the same time, like those videos are big milestone kind of things where it's just like because it's GDQ, it'll get a lot more attention than, you know, going through the not that there's no value in going through the effort of building up your own platform sort of thing, but like, you know,
It's good to have some help.
it's good to have some help, and it's a lot, that's a permanent thing that can't really be taken away from, right?
Mhm.
So I don't know. That's why I focus on it a lot. That's why I always try to have like, 5 or something games every time GDQ submissions roll around. So it's like I can really be like have something ready because, I'm trying to make sure a lot of these games I run get at least one GDQ mainline, whether it's by me or not. I think younger, more immature me was a lot more focused on me being in the runner seat. But now that
Yeah,
I've been in the runner seat a lot, I think I'm more just focused on giving other people that shot of just being up there and putting on a show for the community,
yeah.
as
Community
well as
before
just like
yourself is
community
always
before myself.
yeah,
Exactly, right?
very
And that's
important.
something that has to come with time and maturity.
Hmm. Oh yeah, it takes a while, and that's normal. Like you're not
Yeah.
being selfish, at least not on purpose. It's just you
Yeah.
realize what you care about more as time goes on.
Yeah.
You kind of
Now, to
understand
be
it better.
fair, doing GDQ runs live on stage is really fun.
Oh yeah.
So I still really love doing it. And I feel like everyone who runs like a bunch of weird nonsense has like a couple of those games that are like their baby. And it's like you kind of like so for example, like Neopets, for example, was kind of my baby. So it was like I really wanted to be the one doing the Neopets run, right? And Chibi Robo to an extent, I would say as well. Although there are other people who had claim to that, I think too. There's some other games that I run that I'm probably not going to submit because, I think that's someone else's, darling, and I really want them to have that. Uh, First thing that comes to mind is Mushroom Men: The Spore Wars for the Wii, which I learned about a year ago. I don't remember. I'd have to double check. But that game, for example, is kind of like other than his like, classic Mega Man stuff, and I think what is it? Incredible Crash Test Dummies. I don't remember the name of it. But like between those, like Mushroom Men is like his game. Like he has been pushing for that to get in for like 4 years. So it's like imagine how awful I would feel if I would just like all of a sudden show up, submit it once, and then it gets in, and then
Yeah,
that
I
would
get it.
suck, right? It would kind of take away from that, right? So it's like I don't know.
Yeah, I get it. Um, but yeah, something I learned that what I like more about GDQ runs is not just the runner, but like, the commentary behind it, what they do with it, like, and that takes a group effort, a community effort, and you can have
Yeah,
whoever you want on the commentary, usually, so
yeah,
that's always
and like
nice.
the comment, like, there are so many more ways to contribute to a GDQ run than just being the runner themselves,
Hmm.
right? So like I'll talk about, for example, Chibi Robo Lockout Bingo was at SGDQ, right? And my brother is trying to call me. Nope.
Okay.
Nuh-uh. Interesting. So like for example, obviously me and Kobe were the two runners, but we also had a team of people doing commentary. We had people who were you know, coordinating with the host to make sure that they understood what was going to happen. We had people writing up notes for the restreams. We had someone vetting the card to make sure it would make for a good showcase and make the estimate. And then there was even a team of us brainstorming towards the end of a glitch exhibition incentive at the very last minute. It takes an army. It takes an army to raise a GDQ run. It takes a village to raise a GDQ. I don't know. I butchered the joke, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Hmm.
So like for example, we were just at PAX West, and I got to do Pumpkin Jack, which was really fun. But I'll be completely honest, I was way happier and like satisfied with what I did on the commentary side than what I did with my own run. Not that I think my own run was bad or anything. I think it was good, but it was like, for Pseudo Regalia, for example, which is a game I adore and got to commentate for Hundo for that. I got to talk for like 20 minutes straight, no filler. and I feel like I just nailed it, right? And that felt like, way more satisfying than like doing my own run, even though my own run was really good, right? Or like, I was on couch for Brian Otto's COD 4 run, and I was really proud of myself for trying to commentate a game that I knew nothing about, right? Because I wasn't allowed to play Call of Duty growing up. I don't know if your parents are like this, but my parents were like the ones where it's like they took the ESRB rating literally, where it was like if it's rated T for teen, we weren't allowed to play it till we were like 13, and so
Yeah.
on.
I didn't
Um,
have that except for um like very early on, and this is funny because
mhm.
I wasn't allowed to play Smash Brothers Brawl because it was T. Those bastards.
Oh my god, that's funny.
Yeah, but then people stop caring when high school
Yeah,
hits and whatever. Like
parents give
my
up.
my username comes from when I started playing Grand Theft Auto when I was 12 on Xbox. So it is
Oops.
what it is. It is what it is. So, but yeah,
uh,
just the brawl is always funny to bring up.
it's funny too because Dog's Life is rated T for teen. We had that growing up when we were like 10, and there's literally like a button input combo for dropping a turd, and it's just why was I allowed to play
Awesome.
that? No, it is awesome, but it's also like why?
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the obscure scenes, so that sounds like a time to be had.
Yeah, Dog's Life is one of the games of all
One of
time.
the
It
games of
is.
all time, yeah.
It's great, but it also sucks. It
Mm.
sucks, and I love it for that. If y'all need a GDQ run to go watch the Rickster's run of A Dog's Life. I think it was AGDQ 19's Awful Block.
Hell yeah. Awful
Incredible.
block.
Just
Let's go.
10 out of 10, no notes.
Well, since we kind of went over like the GDQ runs and stuff, I guess we can just hit everything at once. So,
Sure.
what was your first like GDQ performance, I guess?
So, in terms of mainline GDQ events, I think I was on Hotfix once beforehand, but like that was, for a whole different kind of thing. I believe I'm going on GDQ Hots right now just to double check.
The goat.
But
Although
yeah,
the site doesn't work for me sometimes now. It's weird.
unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first GDQ I ever got into, I actually got two games into, which
Ooh.
to me is still insane. I got Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions for the DS and Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights, which ended up being a race between myself and Snowy Moogle. So if you've never, I'll start with Shattered Dimensions DS because this is legit a 10 out of 10 game that people need to play if
I
they own a
think
DS.
we had it.
Really?
Or like my
Hell
brother
yeah.
did, but I
Okay.
didn't care. But yeah.
Yeah, the DS port at least.
Yeah, it was DS.
So the console Shattered Dimensions game is like a more typical Spider-Man beat 'em up, Spider-Man movement sort of thing. Shattered Dimensions DS is a 2D Metroidvania with Spider-Man powers. And the movement system is just chef's kiss. It's so good. It's perfection. Like you can like do web zips into walls and then cancel to redirect, and then it also just has a combat system that reminds me of like Marvel 3 Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 Touch of Deaths. So you can just like infinite combo enemies till they die. It's just a banger. It's such a good game, and that ended up being like the first run I got to do. And then later that week, I ended up doing Scooby Night of 100 Frights, which, like I mentioned earlier, is a Scooby Doo game made by the Battle for Bikini Bottom and SpongeBob movie devs. That is more of a 3D Metroidvania with like kind of side scrollery levels for the most part, but it's a really unique game, and we did a race of that. I don't think Frights has been in a mainline GDQ since, which is unfortunate. Um, but that was a really interesting time to be around the community for that game because me and the other runner, Snowy Moogle, were kind of trading times back and forth. And I had just gotten record, and then Snowy Moogle like also got record like within 24 hours. So it was originally supposed to be one of us. I think by the stroke of midnight, I had records, so I was given the slot, even though Snowy Moogle was like 2 seconds behind. And then we like begged committee, like, please let us do a race. Snowy had the record, right? So it was like, And the race ended up being really close. I think we were within 20 seconds, which is
Sick.
really, really sick.
Yeah.
Um, and then, yeah, so those were my first two GDQ runs. That was AGDQ 21.
Okay.
And then
So
at
online.
SGDQ 20, yeah, online, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't have an offline GDQ run until SGDQ 22. We'll get there. Um, Next run after that was that summer, SGDQ 21, was Truth is Square, actually. So we were
Hmm.
talking a good bit about that earlier.
Yep.
Me and who is, I believe, currently world record holder now, Bubble Bass, aka Sam, we did an any percent race. And, you know, Truth or Square, I kind of already talked about it a good bit. I
Yeah.
got
Facts.
clobbered in the race because I messed up the first trick of the run a little bit. I also had a low blood sugar at the start of that run, so I was when I have like a low blood sugar, I tend to get a little shaky.
Mm.
So that kind of messed me up a little bit. I'm Johnning at this point, but it's like
I
to
think it's
this
fair.
I have had like 3 runs that were either races or 1v1s, and I have lost all 3 on the GDQ stage. It's kind of embarrassing. Uh,
That's my goat.
All right, so that was the only run in I had in that event, I think. Yeah,
And
and
that was summer
then
21 online, you said?
that was summer 21 online,
Okay. Yeah.
and then AGDQ 22 online is when Pumpkin Jack comes into play.
Mm.
And so this is a game I actually just ran at PAX West. But if you don't know, Pumpkin Jack is an indie game that I actually got put onto by a friend of mine from the SpongeBob movie community.
Hmm.
Believe it or not, because he was a mod for it at the time and was like routing and running it. It's a 3D platformer that is very inspired by like Medieval on the PS1. And it has some of the sickest goddamn movement tech I've ever seen. So there's 2 big things. There's one thing called orb boosting, which allows you to do like a dive bomb and then jump cancel it, so you can like bunny hop across the levels and stuff like that. That's dope. And then the other thing that like really sells the game for me is something called orb boost or lamp boosting, where there are these like lamp lanterns posts where if you stand on top of them and break while you're standing on them, they fling you off in a certain direction really, really fast. And if you like hold down a bullet time menu, it sends you even faster. And so you just go flying so fast that the camera cannot keep up. It is super sick. And that run, actually, I managed to get world record by like 3 minutes just because I happened to get, at the time, like every trick just managed to line up for me. So it was a pretty surreal moment, and kind of was like, I feel like if a lot of people have heard of me, it was probably because of that run.
Pumpkin Jaxler.
Which
Yeah. That's how
yeah,
I heard.
which which I have, in a weird way, I kind of have some mixed feelings about, because like I said, I like a whole bunch of different games. I don't really like to be the SpongeBob guy or the Neopets guy or the Pumpkin Jack guy, right?
Just
So
the
it was
guy.
like the guy, yeah, the guy. Where I kind of had this weird relationship where it was like people were really starting to care, but it wasn't about what I had hoped they would care about, if that makes sense. It was more like they cared about the spectacle of like, the world record, and like, oh, this guy who runs this really cool game, rather than like my mission statement, which is to show people a lot of different cool stuff, right? So it probably the single most important moment in my speedrunning career. It probably just changed my life that night. Let's be very real. But also, it's like, it's complicated, if that makes sense. But I still look back on that very fondly. I don't know. It's weird. I'm a weird person. What can I say?
Aren't we all? That's why we
Yeah.
speedrun.
And then I think after Pumpkin Jack, I think, yeah, it was so SGDQ 22 was the return to in person.
Hmm.
And I got one run into that event on the schedule, which is called Warden Melody of the Undergrowth, which is probably like the most me sounding speed game you've ever probably heard of. But this is a game that a friend of mine at S Rock, or Roy Mart, she was really into this game and like glitch hunting and routing it. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna start running this now that you've exposed me to this. And then I got record, and then I started really pushing it. And then I submitted any percent in like a couple of longer categories. They took the any percent run, which is only like a 12-minute run on average. So it's very special to me because it was my first in person on the stage DDQ run. And I also feel like the commentary that we managed to squeeze in 11 minutes was really, really good. But I was like, oh, I wanted like Neopets, or I wanted something a bit longer, right? But like looking back, I'm still kind of shocked that they took it, because it's just such a. For those who don't know, it is like it is very 3D Zelda inspired. Um, Kind of visually takes after a bit of Wind Waker, but it kind of does its own thing in some ways. It's a really interesting little game. If you need like a little kick of like older school 3D Zelda, then I would recommend checking it out. It's usually pretty cheap on like Steam. Um, amazing glitch tech though. There is some, you can wrong warp, you can do some really weird animation state machine nonsense. It's a very fun. It's another one of those bag of tricks runs, but it's also very cohesive. It's a great speed game. Another great beginner run. If you're There's infinite sword glitch in it too, which is great. Like you activate the hitbox, and then it just like it machine guns through enemies. And in Ocarina of Time, like and Majora's Mask, like enemies will have like like iframes between hits. No such cases in Word and Melody of the Undergrowth. So as long as you don't have like a boss with a damage cap, you can just go like and like destroy an enemy's health bar. It's great. All right. Continuing down the list, this is going to take us a little bit, because
Okay.
I think I'm at this point 11 mainline GDQ appearances. If you
Holy
count
shit.
GDQX, yeah. So we're about halfway down the list now. So if you need to cut me off here, cut me
Oh
off.
no,
But I'm
please
rolling.
continue.
Yeah. So the one after that, near and dear to my heart, Neopets: The Darkest Fury, what I like to call the greatest 3D Zelda game of all time. Action adventure game on the PS2 in the Neopets universe. Some of the most batshit insane glitches you have ever seen in a video game. You use a potato sack to fly through walls. You talk to a signpost to duplicate money infinitely. Like, there is a giant void zone at the end of the world underneath every map that extends infinitely. It's just it's a game. I'm not even gonna talk about it anymore. You just have to watch the run. You just have to look up a Neopets: The Darkest Fairy speedrun. Look up my GDQ run. I don't care. Do you After you're done listening to this episode, go watch that run. It will change your life either for better or for worse.
Perfect.
But yeah, this is
What
a game I
GDQ was
learned
that?
this was uh, this was SGDQ 2023. So I did not
Okay.
make it, because there was an online AGDQ 23,
Yeah.
which I was not a part of. I think that is the only mainline GDQ I have missed since. Although I won't be going to GDQX. So depend. Some people don't count GDQX, some people do. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But like,
I've been also lucky in like the exact same way since summer
yeah,
23, so
yeah. So yeah, no, I don't treat it like a given, So it's like
no, it's a gift.
it is a gift, yeah. But like Neopets like
The
is
gift that
a
keeps on
very
giving.
the gift that keeps on getting, yeah. But like Neopets is such a near and dear game in my heart. This was one of the games I learned in a 12-hour challenge during when I was at school. But it like spiraled out of control when people like Monster 860, for example, started glitch hunting the game, and like we brought the run down to basically like sub 50 relatively quick. So that game is so cool. I'm so glad they let me do that at GDQ. I just wish it wasn't at like 5 a.m. It's like
Yeah.
such a banger, but it's like I don't know. Maybe one day I'll get my run back, but I don't know. Anywho, so my next GDQ run after that was actually at last year's GDQX, in the one in Vegas, in which I did Pseudo Regalia any percent. So that was actually my first time opening for a GDQ event.
Oh, opening.
And it was I basically so Pseudo Regalia is a indie 3D Metroidvania. It is incredible. I'm gonna say that about basically every game on here except the last one I'm gonna talk about.
Well,
Um,
with this one specifically, I've even heard of it with people praise its like movement
Oh my god,
completely. Yeah.
it has one of the best 3D movement engines I've ever played. You have like slide jumps and gainers and backflips and just really creative ways you can chain your aerial resources. It's stunning, right? It's amazing. Um and so I I generally don't, as a rule of thumb, I don't like running games on release because if I get invested in the game and the run, as it turns out, becomes something that I'm less interested in, I don't like to set myself up for disappointment. Um, and on top of that as well, it's like, usually new release games tend to have really big communities at the start. And the more people there are, I find the less I get to really engage with the community as a whole. And I really value that interpersonal relationship when it comes to speedrunning communities. But Pseudo Regalia was a game jam game originally, and it came out uh, in my like last semester of grad school. And we were at the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco as a part of that. And this game jam project comes up, and I hear about it on Twitter, and I play it, and I start. I didn't have an internet connection in San Fran, so I just started routing it on my own and just playing with it and sciencing it whenever we had free time back at the hotel at the end of every night. And I did that for like the entire week. It was kind of embarrassing. Because it was like, oh, I'm in San Fran for this, career thing. Like this is a big deal for me to be able to go here. And I just like that was not the focus. It was Cedar Regalia was the focus. Which, might be a bit of a spoiler warning to where I'm at right now, but but that's neither here nor there. I fell in love with the game, and then the game got taken from a game jam project to a full release with like a lot more content and just like an entire new area and a whole bunch of stuff. One of the greatest games ever released in that year. Um, Unbelievable. I got to run any percent as the opener for GDQX, and I managed to do it solo commentary,
Mm.
which I really wanted to prove to myself that I could do a mainline GDQ run like by myself without help. Because for a lot of these runs, like Pumpkin Jack and Warden and Neopets, one of my best friends, Corundum Core, aka Ruby, had pretty much always been on couch with me, and kind of carried me on commentary in a lot of ways. And not that I didn't really appreciate that. We make a really good team. I also kind of wanted to prove to myself that I could do it, if that makes sense. So I was really happy with that, how that went. Um, that event itself though was kind of funny. I don't know if you've been to a GDQX Ace, but like
My
I
first
was
will be in 2 weeks.
oh yeah, okay, yeah, because
I'm
you got in. That's
closing.
right. That's
What
so
the
sick.
fuck? What
Congrats.
the fuck?
That's so dope. Um,
How am I gonna get there? That's the problem I have right now.
Rutro.
Yeah.
Speedrunning finds a way.
I will run there if I have to.
Yeah. I'm sure this will be less of a problem since it's in San Diego. But last year's TwitchCon was in Vegas, and I'm not a Vegas person.
Hmm.
And to me, like TwitchCon was a lot more of a streamer networking and like streaming the industry type of event. So like I did my run first off, and that was great. And then I just kind of hung out backstage for like the rest of the event because I'm
Yeah.
like I walked the expo floor once, didn't really see anything that interested me, and I'm not one to be like all about like big streamers or like want to go to meet and greets and like all that. That's not
Hmm.
really for me. So I just kind of hung out backstage,
Fair.
which was good vibes. I got to kind of like, make more friends and like really like have like actual long form conversations with people without like the pressure of like, oh, I could be doing something else, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Because there was kind of no something else to go do unless you wanted to be like, let's go gambling,
Let's go game.
Oh, dang it. So
Classic.
that was a fun event. It was also interesting, but yeah, it has less to do with Super Regalia, more to do with Vegas. Don't go to Vegas.
Hmm.
I'm not a Vegas appreciator. Unless
I,
you live in Vegas, then you can go to Vegas because you live there.
yeah.
This is a
Oh,
dumb joke. I'm sorry.
I visited there last year, like family vacation. Um,
Oh, okay.
it. I mean, it was fun, but no, I
Mhm.
get wanting to avoid it. I
Yeah.
I kind of liked more the going into like Utah for the national parks part of our trip.
Oh, I bet. Like if you
Yeah.
if you go into Vegas with like a game plan, like, oh, we're gonna go to this museum, we're gonna go
Yeah,
to
it
this
was there was
national
a game
park,
plan. Yes.
then that's good. If you're like me, where I'm just like, oh, I'm going to Vegas because I have a run at TwitchCon. Uh,
It's a little harder to navigate.
yeah, there was also like some sort of F1 like race going on or something like that. So they were like
Mm.
building like stands and like raceway stuff.
What the
And they just,
fuck?
yeah, exactly why. And they just did not have the infrastructure as a city to be able to handle that and TwitchCon. So it was just like, yeah.
Well, at least that was just once, I guess.
Yeah, hopefully once and never again. Well, and it's funny too because I was like, "Oh, great, TwitchCon's in San Diego," and then I'm like, "Oh, I didn't get in. Oops."
Oops. Yeah.
But anywho, um, and so AGDQ 2024 is the next one that I get into, and I was originally only scheduled to do one run on the actual layout, which was Pseudo Regalia. So for those who don't know, GDQX isn't really considered when submitting. Like if you did a
Mainline.
run at GDQX, it doesn't like count recency wise for things like AGDQ, SGDQ.
Yeah, that's right.
Um, so I got any percent in for Pseudo Regalia, and then there was I eventually managed to convince them to let me do an all abilities incentive, which was just way better because 80% for Pseudo Regalia is cool, but the more things you get to do in that game, the more cool the run is. IMO. So
Fair, fair.
yeah, I got to show off all abilities, which I've already kind of talked a bit about Pseudo Regalia, but I got to do that one with Corundum Core again and have some assistance on the commentary, and I felt really happy with how that run went generally.
Mhm.
The thing that I didn't expect happening was a game I had on backup getting pulled off, which was Whiplash. So for those who don't know how GDQ works, you have like a games list and like a schedule, right? But they
Mhm.
always take a couple extra runners and runs as backup, just in case someone gets sick or like there's a scheduling problem or what have you. GDQ had introduced something new into their schedule called the checkpoint, where what they would do is it would be a time for some interstitial content where if they were too far behind schedule, it'd be a predetermined period that they could cut out to get back on track. But this GDQ ran so smoothly and so ahead of schedule that for pretty much all of these checkpoint blocks, they took backup runs and put them in on the checkpoint. And lo and behold, the first one that they took for these was Whiplash. And Whiplash is an incredible. It is one of the games of all time.
Mhm.
It was made by the Crystal Dynamics, so they're mostly known for Tomb Raider, but this was made right after Gex 3. So it is a game about a weasel chained to a rabbit in which you try to escape an animal testing facility and cause massive amounts of property damage. Um, the
Oh
run is
shit.
just as yeah, the run is just as insane as it sounds. And because it was pulled off the backup into the checkpoint, this game, which had no business being anywhere other than Graveyard Shift, was at prime time at like 5 p.m. Eastern. And so
Hell
I
yeah.
got to play this hilarious, but also like the game is sick as a speedrun too, because you've got like glitch triple jump, quad jump tech, out of bounds nonsense, sprint management. It holds its own as a speedrun. But the game is also insane. So that would be another VOD after watching this podcast that I would go and check out because goddamn,
uh,
that game is just hilarious.
and also shout
But
out this for letting that happen at all, but the dual setup there,
yeah,
awesome stuff. Thank you so much.
yeah, that's
Banger.
part of the reason they were so far ahead
Yeah,
is
I know.
because they'd saved so much time. But like, because they actually like demoed that at GDQX
Oh wow.
2023. That's where they first tested it before bringing it to mainline. So
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's cool.
it was super sick. Um, yeah, and then so in a weird way, Whiplash was kind of great for me because it kind of ended up being another run that really like popped off with people. So I felt like in some ways, like because Whiplash happened, I feel like I'd no longer live in the shadow of my Pumpkin Jack run, if that makes sense. Because it's like I feel like I had another tick on the resume where it's like I'm not just the Pumpkin Jack guy. I also did Whiplash and I did XYZ thing, and it's like that was kind of in a way it felt like maybe it was just a personal thing for me, but it felt like kind of a turning point.
Hmm.
I don't know. But Whiplash is maybe one of my favorite GDQ run experiences. Period. It was also very last minute, so I had to warm up like really really quick to get ready for that, and I had to completely improvise commentary. Um, my friends Ruby and Helix, I had them join the couch with no prior knowledge whatsoever. Which means with just the way the game is and is written, um, their reactions are probably what your reactions would be, which is just what the hell is happening.
As it should.
um, yeah, so I would check that one out too. It's very funny. And then going up to present day, I had 2 runs in this most recent GDQ somehow. The more important one for me being Chibi Robo. I had talked a lot about how Chibi Robo is such an important game to me. We had been at this point trying to get Chibi Robo into a mainline GDQ for about 8 years consistently. And so SGDQ 2024 was finally the one where we got the golden ticket for Chibi Robo. And so we did what's called 1v1 lockout bingo, which means you have a bingo card of 25 objectives. And if you complete that objective, you get to mark off that square. And it's a race to 13 objectives, with the catch being that if you mark an objective, the other player is locked out from marking it permanently. And so it kind of becomes this like competition of mind games and routing and like prediction, if that makes sense. And so I am very happy that we got to do that. It was also maybe one of the most stressful things. That this whole GDQ in general was really stressful for me because I had just come from a wedding, so I had to pretend to be neurotypical for about a whole weekend, in formal wear, which was just rough. And then I have to go into this run being on Tuesday of that week, so I had to go into like game plan mode of just like getting everything situated. I had to be the ringleader for a lot of different moving parts, right? And then the run itself was really stressful because it's a really high intensity, mind game sort of thing. And I was nervous. And then, Kobe also played freaking amazing. So that was tough. Almost brought it back, but. And then last minute, we also got asked, hey, we are desperate for incentives. Can you all do like a glitch exhibition thing? And we're like, sure. So then we also had to plan that out in advance and make like memory cards and stuff like that. So very, very rewarding. And it all turned out really great. But also one of the most stressful things that I have ever done in my life. Very happy that happened though, because now I no longer have to submit to Chibi Robo to every GDQ since I started going to GDQs. So
Yeah,
yay!
I was convinced to like get on the back couch for that, where all
Oh
the people
yeah.
were. That was a good decision. I will never look at divorce the same way again.
Yeah, when I was talking a little bit earlier about how we had someone vet the card, we specifically asked to have divorce on the card because we knew how funny that would be.
And in the middle of the free space, will
In
you?
the middle of the free space.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I got divorce spoilers, but I got divorce sniped. That was crazy. Because
Damn.
it's like I could be mad that I lost, but as long as it was hype, then I don't care. Like if you see a snipe like that, you can't script that, and that's why I was really happy about how it went, even though I got my ass kicked.
Yeah, you
I'd
guys got
say
divorced very
very
quickly.
quickly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right next to each other. It's pretty crazy.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
felt happy with how I played that towards the end. I feel like I'm going into meta analysis now on my bingo match, but like. I almost pulled it back at the end. I was like this close, like 1 or 2 reads away, but it's one of those things where when someone has that big of a lead, they can kind of checkmate you or like, fork you in chess where it's like either way I'm losing a piece here. So it's like you have to make reads. And I've made most of them, but I've made one too few. So it's
Yeah.
just you don't the thing that's stressful is you just don't want it to be a blowout. Because if it's a blowout, it's just not entertaining. Right? So but there's that. And then we went from the most stressful run I've ever done at a GDQ to the least stressful run I've ever done at a GDQ, which is Stuart Little 2 for the PlayStation 1. So I refer to Stuart Little 2 as Stuart in the Secret Rings, or Mom said we had Mario 64 at home. This is a PS1 3D collectathon, and it's not great.
Is it not?
It's pretty jank. It's pretty. But I grew up with it. I have so to give you an idea of the quality of this game, this is a PlayStation 1 game that came out in 2002. The PlayStation 1 or the PlayStation 2 had already released by then. Jack and Daxter 1 came out a year before Stuart Little 2 for the PS1, I think. Just to give you an idea of the timeline, right? So I submitted Stuart Little 2 for Silly Block as like an afterthought because I couldn't think of a 5th game to submit, and they took it. I don't know why. I still don't know why. But it was a great time, and people donated their fun Stuart Little facts, and it was incredible. Um, yeah, I don't have much to say on that run other than that. Um, Stuart Little 2 was one of those games that I had run because it was like, okay, I grew up with this and I remembered loving it. And I was like, wow, I was a dumb idiot as a kid. And I was like, wait, it would be really funny if I ran this. And then it was funny. And then the joke went too long and I got into GDQ. So, oops.
Oh well,
Oh well, might as
it
well.
happens.
Yeah, I didn't. The funny thing too is I had not finished a full any percent run of that game since it had been announced that it had made the schedule. That was my first completed run of the game in like months. I had like practiced individual levels and stuff like that, but like, yeah.
Coming prepared. Yeah.
Yeah, so that kind of I guess takes us up to present day. Fortunately, won't be going to GDQX, but starting to prepare a bit for AGDQ. Kind of in an interesting spot because I won't be submitting Chibi Robo for the first time in what feels like ages, but
Because it finally happened.
it finally happened. But I do want them to take a full game run one day. It's a tough sell, but emotionally I need it. Um, um, on my Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the full game RTA of Chibi Robo at GDQ mainline is at all stages of the pyramid. It's just
Mhm.
it's like that one meme.
How long's the any percent run now?
My record in any percent is like 2:05, 2 hours 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But you'd
Okay.
probably submit like a 2 hour 15-minute estimate. But there's some routing stuff I need to do that would not only make it more consistent, but it would also skip more cutscene.
Mm-hmm.
So
You said
crossing the old fingers.
you said like half the game's cutscene, right? And someone was
Yes.
working on like a cutscene remover.
Yeah.
That
It
could be good for it.
exists for
Yeah.
the most part. But we all kind of talked about it, and we're like, you're missing kind of the magic of the game if your marathon run is the cutscene skip mod.
I see. Like
And the other thing too,
you
oh,
don't get
sorry, go ahead.
divorced without with cutscene skips.
Yeah,
So
exactly. You don't
very
get
important.
divorced.
Yeah.
Very important. But I think the other thing too is that it only works on English GameCube, and the Wii version, which is the one that you use for any percent, is a lot different of a route, and is honestly kind of its own run.
Hmm.
And like I think we've all kind of agreed that that's probably the run we would want to showcase on JDQ. Is the Wii, like the Wii route.
Okay.
I don't know if that probably doesn't make any hell of a sense, but that's where we're at.
It doesn't, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. Yippee.
Yippee.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. In terms of GDQ runs, in terms of like what I'm actually speedrunning right now, I'm kind of at a point where now that my obligation with Pumpkin Jack at PAX West is done, I'm kind of at a spot where I kind of have free reign to work on whatever I want to. But I've been kind of in the bad habit of picking up new games and runs and then like not working on my old projects. So I'm trying to work on some of my older, more out of date times. So like I want to get back to Pseudo Regalia. I want to get back to Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions DS. I've been thinking about Scooby a little bit, which I haven't run in forever. I want to get top 3 of SpongeBob Movie. And this is how you know that I have untreated ADHD. The way that I am motivating myself to get these goals is by rewarding myself with allowing myself to learn a new game on my like hit list. So I mentioned this to some other people, but I have like this spreadsheet called the hit list of just like almost 100 games that I just think are like really cool or interesting and should be like I just so I can kind of keep tabs on them, and as also as a way to recommend games to other people. And like there's like a lot of them games on here that I would end up going on to run a lot more, or even like run on a mainline event like Pseudo Regalia, Vex, Ward and Melody of the Known Growth is on here, Lunistis, which Nastani ran, which another cool game. Yeah, so if anyone's interested in like finding more weird games, just hit my line because I will find something for you that is bizarre and will make you uncomfortable in a good way. Um,
Great.
yeah. If you ever want spicy speedrun recommendations, you know where to get. Um, but I also don't typically like. I'll share the doc with friends, but also I don't like advertise the existence of the doc all the time because like people sometimes misunderstand it as like, oh, that means you put it on here, that means you're gonna run it, and that's not
Mm,
necessarily the case
yeah.
because I might really enjoy the casual playthrough, but I might not want to run it per se.
Hmm. It's just a maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you said there's like 100 games on it.
Let's see. So it's 96 minus 2. So there's 94 games on here. This also includes games that I have already run or games I have decided that I am not going to run.
Mm,
There's one on here called The Tale of Despero that just has it's highlighted red and it just in status because I have like game platform category and like where I'm at with the game. Like, have I learned it yet? Am I ready to learn it? Have I bought it? Do I have it set up? Sort of thing.
hmm.
And my status for The Tale of Despero is just hell, 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 all caps, because it
Mm,
just sucks. Um, it's a game that does not want you to speedrun it. It's one of those kinds of games where it's like you try to do cool things and the game just doesn't allow you to.
mm.
Which is tragic, but that's how it be.
Yeah, can't have that. All right. Well, yeah, that's quite the list. So at least
Yeah,
you have years of content if you need it, I guess.
exactly, right? Yeah. Well,
Never get old.
that's the thing is it's not really about content for me. I just like doing it
Well, yeah,
because I'm a
no, I
nerd,
just
right?
the term
I
I
get what you're
use.
saying though. I get what you're saying though.
Yes, exactly. Well, I know we kind of just talked about the GDQ runs specifically, but is there like anything that's happened that we didn't go over?
Um, I mean, other than PAX West, which we've kind of talked about a decent bit, not really. The only other run I'd say, at least GDQ wise, that I would really call any attention to is Lunistis by Nistani. Because Lunistis was another one of those games that I kind of like picked up on release by accident and got really hooked on. And then a friend of mine, Nistani, who I met through speedrunning Scooby Night of 100 Frights, ended up seeing me play the game and then got like ridiculously good. And so he got to do that run at GDQ, and then I got to commentate that, and that was a really special thing for me too. That was another really good run that I got to be a part of. But I mean, other than that, not really. I guess if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like
So
I've done a
no,
bunch of online marathons, but it's just like I just love doing those. So it's not like
yeah, it doesn't
it's
count.
not like the same level as like a GDQ. Not that like online marathons aren't amazing and
Yeah,
awesome
no,
and
of
stuff like
course.
that, but it's like a lot of my friends run marathons, so it's like I'll submit to their marathons kind of thing. So it's like
Mm. A little easier to get in, we'll say.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. It's not like you have like 0.1% of people who apply to GDQ go into the GDQ sort of thing.
Mhm. So are there any speed games we didn't go over that you'd like to shed some more light on?
I think I covered. Well, I mean, we just covered Lunistis a little bit.
Yeah.
I guess the other one that's a bit more recent that I'm really working on right now, and I'm definitely going to be playing a bit more in the near future, is a game called Frog Monster. It kind of looks like the voxel Minecraft aesthetic, but like a lot smaller blocks. But it's a Metroidvania FPS made by like one guy, and it's really damn good. It's on Steam. It's relatively cheap. You should play it. It's got like 32 like Dark Souls caliber bosses in it, and the guns all feel super great. It's got like the Hollow Knight charm system to it. Frog Monster is so damn good. You should play it. It came out in April, and I already have like 180 hours in it, which is more than I have in Lunistis. Um, and it's approaching Pseudo-Regalia hours for me, which, if you know me, that should shock you. I also generally don't run a lot of FPS stuff, so if I recommend you an FPS game, you should probably play it. But yeah, I was kind of involved with a lot of like the early routing and strat hunting and stuff like that for the game, but now we're kind of in the point where the I'd say the glitches and skips are settled, but there are things like builds and like upgrades and stuff like that I don't think is fully solved yet. So as a result, there's kind of been a lot of There's been a lot of interesting stuff going on with that game. And we've only really delved into any percent. I just freaking love the game so much. Um, so this is just another one of Jackson recommends you one of his speed games. But yeah, please play Frog Monster. That's I think that's like the only other one that really comes to mind.
All right. So, did we cover everything then?
Probably.
Probably. Fair enough.
Probably. 50-50.
Oh, those are some
Who
odds.
knows? Yeah, who knows what game I'll be hyper obsessing over next, it's one of those kinds of things.
hmm So, and I guess you did kind of go over like future plans for the most part.
Yeah, definitely working on some of that sort of stuff. There's also a couple of games that I have on my radar that I know pretty much for a fact that I really want to try to run. I don't usually like to talk about things I plan on doing. There's a study somewhere where like you get in psychology where it's like you get as much of a dopamine hit from announcing that you're going like announcing what your goal is as you do like actually completing it. And if you're someone like me with ADHD, probably it's like if you get that dopamine hit, there's no motivation to like get it, like the actual goal itself, because like you already got the dopamine hit,
hmm
right? Um, so a lot of these games that I'm super excited about are like tied to specific goals that I have, but I'm not going to share what those goals are, if that makes sense. But for example, I really want to play Taz Wanted. Like Taz is in like the like Tasmanian Devil from like Looney Tunes.
hmm
There's a like a 3D platformer kind of. I don't know too much about it, but it looks fire. It's called Taz Wanted. I really want to play that game, and run it. Another game that's on my radar is Sphinx and the Cursed Mummy. It was recommended to me by Amber Cyprin. I played it casually. It honestly kind of feels like a 3D Zelda in a lot of ways, but really cool game, cool tech. I want to learn that one too. Um, Another one I'm really interested in is Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, because it just looks dope, and I really want to try playing it. And then I think the other one that I'm really looking forward to trying to learn is Kaya Dark Lineage. It's a PS2 action adventure that's like really interesting. I don't know if it'll necessarily be the most like interesting game to run, but like I it's one of those games that I think most people would not like, but I think it's dope. So I'm gonna like mess around with it. So
Fair enough.
I don't know. That's where I'm at.
Yep. Well, so it sounds like everything has been covered,
Yeah, pretty
right?
much.
All right. Want to make sure nothing was missed in the
Yeah.
history. So,
hmm
all right. Well, I guess GG's then.
Yeah, GG's. I was gonna say if you had any
GG.
other like questions for me, or if anyone who's watching like the live stream version of this had any questions for me, I mean, feel free
Yeah,
as well. But
please. But yeah, I think I've covered everything I wanted to ask. Trying to
awesome.
think.
We'll just go ahead and say that if you're watching this on YouTube, then you should subscribe to GTA's 99
Why
on
me?
YouTube. Why you? Because you're the one who's making the thing. That's why.
Oh, okay. I guess that's
Because they're
fair.
watching the VOD on this channel, so they should scroll down and
I
hit that
don't
funny
have
little
a
red button.
I don't have a good rebuttal. All right.
Get owned.
Get absolutely destroyed.
Get wrecked.
Well, uh well, instead of shouting me out, you can shout yourself out now if you
Sure,
want.
I'll do that too. You know what? What? You know what? All go. Equal and opposite reactions, right?
Exactly.
Most of what I do is I Twitch stream the stuff I'm working on, so you can find me at twitch.tv/Jaxler1. I also will upload like runs and like sometimes tutorials and like strats that I find on YouTube, youtube.com/c/Jaxler. I don't really do like content in the traditional sense. I just like running the games and talking about them, ad-libbing how I'm feeling. My ADHD ass cannot write for the life of me, so it kind of kneecaps me if I ever wanted to like do content. But like at the same time, like yeah, that's where you can check me out. Mostly stream though. Love
Yeah.
mostly doing runs of something you've probably never heard of before. So if you're looking for something new, come check it out. If not, cool. I guess.
Awesome.
Cool. Your loss.
Fair. There's also Twitter, but Twitter's
Yeah.
free. But
Yeah. For the occasional oven retweet, you can find me at Jaxler SR on Twitter. That sort
perfect.
of thing.
You know where to find the links. They're all there.
Yeah, but
But yeah,
thanks for having me.
yeah. Thanks for being on. I like learning about games that are weird and that I've never heard of. So
Yeah, we
perfect.
gotta get you running. We gotta get you running some stuff that isn't like Mario. We
I
gotta
don't know. I
we gotta
really
season
don't
your palate.
play anything too like off the beaten path. I just never have.
I wonder if you'd like Vex,
I haven't
because
heard of it.
it's very yeah. Oh, that's another game I could have talked about, but
I mean,
yeah.
you still have time.
I guess I do still have time, but like, so Vex is another 3D collectathon platformer, but it's very Mario 64 core,
Mm.
and it's just like it's mostly just like movement, and mostly just like moving and grooving sort of thing. So, because I know you did some like Mario 64 type of stuff, so it's like
Hmm.
it actually has it's not the greatest camera ever, but it has a better camera than Mario 64, so I think it has merit. But
Fair enough.
there's a really great category in that game too. It's called Troll Tag now, but it used to be called Balls Percent. Where there is this a lot of the like objectives in the game kind of are modeled after some of the Mario 64 things. Like, you have your red coin stars, you have your 100, 100 coin star sort of thing. In Vex, you have soul jar hearts where you have to find 6 soul jars. That's kind of like your red coin mission. In one of the levels, one of these soul jars is held by this giant goblin.
Hmm.
And when you get close to him to try to grab it from him, he like holds it up like here and he's like laughing at you and he's like and so in order to get it, you basically kick him in the nuts.
Oh,
And
awesome.
that causes him to drop it and play a great animation. And so the goal of the balls percent category is to kick him in the nuts as quickly as possible.
Sold. Where do I sign up now?
It's like your first run would probably be like a 30 to 40 minute run. It's actually pretty solid. Um, the game is just long, so like my any percent record in that is like an hour 30 something RTA on console. You can also play it on emulator too, and that's allowed because load remove time. Let's go.
Let's go. I love that.
Accessibility. You love
Hmm.
to see it.
I do love to see it.
People have been saying this.
Hmm. It's true.
Um,
I've been saying
yeah,
this. I'm people.
yeah. It's me. I'm people. Yeah. Hoping that we get Vex in the like next GDQ or a soon GDQ. I might actually learn the troll tag run just so it has a better shot.
Submit
That's
balls
like
percent. I
submit balls.
perfect. I
Submit
mean,
balls.
let's be honest. GDQ like viewers would love that.
Oh yeah.
Let's just keep it a stack. Like
We'll have to submit the name as troll tag. I mean, that's just the rules. But
no.
like,
I,
them's the
I
breaks.
think balls is good.
Well, that's the name of the category on SRC now, so it's like
Yeah.
I gotta be
Just
lore accurate. You know what I mean?
just submit balls. It works.
Category 1, balls.
Balls. I mean, they did have like some donation incentive or something that was called like shit percent or something. I forget
Oh, the
exactly.
oh shit level.
Oh, the oh shit. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean,
Oh my
balls.
god.
It'll work. It'll work. We're planning out
Uh,
GDQ's next schedule right now. They're ready.
exactly.
All right. Well, I guess we can call it a day here. So
Yeah,
yeah,
sounds good. And again, thank you for having me. This was
yeah,
a
no
lot of
problem.
fun. Thank you for letting me hyperfixate on speedrunning for 2 hours.
That's what we're all about here. So
Oh yeah.
nothing out of the ordinary, other than maybe the games, but that's
Yeah.
the
No,
point.
my games are definitely out of the ordinary. I'm sure you get a lot more normal, well-adjusted people on here more frequently.
Well,
Yeah. Maybe not well-adjusted, but like
I at least know the games they run. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, right?
This is like, oh, interesting.
Yeah, you
Which
just
is
like
also fun.
yeah, just nod your head and pretend like you understand. No, I get it.
No, I genuinely like because I've always thought like every game has its own thing, and
Yeah.
including the just obscure sometimes shit games. Like
Yeah.
they might be obscure sometimes shit games, but they'll usually have something that makes for a good speed run. And I
Yeah,
mean, you
that's
say
why
that with like the awful block, like it's always
yeah.
a banger. Like,
That's why I say there's no such thing as a bad speed game,
mhm.
right? Because like a speedrun's not bad, it just doesn't appeal to whoever's like saying that the speedrun is bad, right?
Mhm.
Like for ages, people had been saying that the SpongeBob movie speedrun is a bad speedrun, you know, and in comparison to Battle for Bikini Bottom, it doesn't have cruise boosting, but it has a lot of cool stuff in it, and they're like, oh, it has driving, it has sliding. Well, we like those levels too, so it's not your
Mhm.
thing. Cool. That doesn't mean it's a bad speed game, right?
Yeah.
There's no such thing as bad or good. It's just speed games that exist, and we apply our own values and limits to them.
Bad and good is subjective. All right. Well, I
Knowledge
guess
bomb. All right. On
knowledge.
that note,
On that note, get out. No.
go away.
Go away. What a you can't make a better ending than this. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, take care everyone. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Watch on YouTube if you want.
Yeah.
Watch on Twitch if you
Hit the
want.
like button.
Hit like, comment, and subscribe. You know the
Yeah.
deal.
Do the YouTube funny buttons.
The YouTube funny buttons. Yeah, I gotta write that down. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.